So you want me to tell you? Well, it's not my horror story, but you want me to tell? It's my turn now, is it?
Yes, Sonia, please.
Well, it wasn't for me, but I remember my cousin Trevor telling me that once his dad took him and his younger brother, my other cousin Derek. They were probably like 11 and 13, something like that. To see it was either Halloween. I can't remember if it was Halloween or I think it was Friday the 13th that he took them to see when they were, when they were like basically 11 and 12 years old or something ridiculous like that. And he said, yeah, their dad basically just said, let's go watch this film on a Sunday. There's nothing better to do.
Yeah,
But
I
I
think
don't think they
parenting
were
has changed.
traumatized by anything, thankfully.
Uh, Parenting has changed since then, but I'm gonna follow my dad's footstep. I'm gonna expose my not that and it's on purpose, but if he wants to, or he or she or whatever kid I have wants to um, join me for watch film, I explained the situation. And they said, if that's not, because I always wanted, I was scared, but still I wanted to go and watch it. That
Yeah, yeah.
excitement of watching a horror film, the fangs coming down. Christopher Lee, which my dad used to talk about him a lot about his previous film, and he was his favorite Dracula because he was so tall and he actually nailed that acting as a Dracula. So I grew up with all this discussion that my dad had with me as if he was talking to another adult film buff.
Yeah.
I think that went into my subconscious as a child and is affecting the way I approach filmmaking and storytelling, etc.
Did you ever see that film? Because you were talking about Christopher Lee. Did you ever see what was his name? Ed Wood used to make those terrible B movies at one point. Before
Yeah,
his career went down, and he basically hired Bela Lugosi, who at one point was a really famous actor, and then sadly his career started going downhill. So, and obviously he was making these really rubbish movies, which he needed attention for. So he hired Bela Lugosi, and Bela Lugosi's Dracula or something. But then sadly he passed away during shooting. So when you watch that film, you can see him, and the trailer's got Bela Lugosi. But then as the film progresses, I mean, it's absolutely terrible. um, but as the film progresses, you just see this vampire walking around with a big black cape covering his covering his face. And what they did was they replaced Bela Lugosi, because he'd sadly passed away, with a chiropractor that was about 6 foot something tall, and he's just walking around with his cape sort of covering his face, trying to conceal his identity. It's just really funny to watch, but then it's sad to realize why he's walking around like that, obviously. So I only really kind of remember um from footage that Bela Lugosi was also a Dracula at one point. What, was he also in any of the films as Dracula, Bela Lugosi?
To be honest with you, I don't know the name. Maybe I'm familiar with the faces.
Yeah,
More
I think he was
that
a
might be.
Hungarian actor, but I know he was very big at one point, and then as he got older,
I think I know which one you're referring to.
yeah.
Um,
Did you
but,
ever see that film, Nosferatu?
yeah, the which original one,
That's the
1920.
original one, isn't it? And I have
Yeah,
to admit I haven't seen it because I know it's a silent movie, but it was featured on like this top 100 scariest
yeah,
moments of all time, and I think that film came out in the 1920s.
yeah.
Um,
In 1920. Yeah, you're right.
what was it?
29, if I'm not.
Yeah, yeah. And when it came out, it was so shocking. Like, I remember seeing the footage of and I was saying people were screaming, and it was a silent movie, and it was just the way his makeup was done and his face was pulled back. Um, but I remember someone telling me that it nearly actually didn't get made because I think Bram Stoker's wife actually didn't want it to go through for copyright reasons or something. But yeah, that's that's like the very first like vampire film, isn't it? Dracula film.
Yeah, that interesting. You mentioned the 1920s expressionist German cinema.
Mm.
That includes the other one, the Metropolis, etc.
Yeah. I've seen clips
Very,
of that as well, but I haven't seen the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah. But that whole approach of the lighting and the approach of those, which kind of helps, especially if you're making a horror film. Those high contrast angles and Dutch angles and weird, approach to the lighting. It's actually something lots of filmmakers since then they're following footsteps of German filmmakers.
Yeah.
Try to that technique because, funny enough, one of the which later on if we get to the discussion about that, I'll mention it.
Okay.
One of the main kind of genre that if you want to go as a filmmaker, especially those who like me or other new filmmaker wants to get into breaking into industry and trying to raise funding, is horror film. It has a huge market out there.
Really?
And lots of people too. Yeah. You either have to make comedy or horror or action.
So do you think they're the ones that bring in the most money other than the franchises?
No, because the people are more willing to
watch them,
pay for them, and the investors and producer are happy to put that because bottom line is a business. If a producer doesn't think that is whatever they're spending on the money doesn't bring the money back, they wouldn't waste their money.
No,
so,
exactly.
And horror, action, and comedy are the three usually genre that is cheap to make, and also it's easy to sell it in the market everywhere. So lots of going back to the point you made about German cinema and where we left off. So lots of filmmakers, including myself, they use those, the approach of 1920s approach of expressionist German cinema to make a film, make a horror film. Because with a nice angle, high contrast black and white, Dutch angle, whatever, you can make that horror film anywhere.
And you can definitely see those influences. Actually, you're right. So they obviously those. I mean, they're very old films, but actually, a lot of them are still they still look very much like they're ahead of their time. Because Metropolis, I've seen bits of it, but it just looks absolutely amazing the way they depict the future. It's like this. I know, it's just the way the buildings are, and I just, and the music and everything, it's incredible. I mean, I think it was all like it was all basically like not apart from the humans, obviously, it was all like miniature sets, really, wasn't it? It was like not Lego, but something like that. It was all these tiny little things. And the way they filmed it was so effective.
Yeah, decoration and in the studio. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
And I agree with you.
Not Lego,
and
but
also something that I referred earlier on, film language. If you go back in the old films, okay, because they were very purist in regards to approach to making films, and they followed that specific language of filmmaking, are very good source of learning filmmaking.
Because when did they start? Hang on, I'm going to look up. Who was the very first person who invented the camera? It was the Lumiere brothers, wasn't it? Because I remember.
Well, it's a little bit fuzzy because it was a process of completing. Every person brought a new thing, but Lumiere brothers they got their name in the history of the first people who did the moving images and used camera.
Yes, because I remember going to the museum in Lyon, but and they're basically that's how they project them. Is like they're the very first ones that invented film, basically, which was this new medium that came out at the time. So sorry, you were saying before I interrupted you, but I just know that's roughly when sort of the films sort of started getting made, really, wasn't it? As soon as
Yeah, it started. Yeah, it's
The
true.
technology
Yeah, you're right.
started.
Yeah, you're right. And yeah, as I was saying, because the first, if you look at especially the silent era,
mm,
although I was listening to another podcast the other day. I was listening to Sam Mendes was a guest on Roger Deakins'
oh,
podcast.
okay.
Sam Mendes was referring because he's coming from the background of the theater director.
Yeah.
You know? So he was mentioning that in film, unlike he was comparing the two medium, but he was talking about the film is just how it's about the actor and actors, and the actors give you those dialogue and exposition about the story, and then you add some other scene to make it visually stunning. But you know, but if we talking about that, actually, if you go to the silent era and take that dialogue out, so everything was based on giving exposition through uh, images,
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
visually. So it's much more pure approach to evoking emotion in the audience through the specific means of filmmaking.
Mm.
The camera, the lighting, and all those the other thing that creates the mise en scène.
Oh
So
God!
it's
Do you know what? When I went to college, because you just said mise en scène, so
okay.
because sorry, before you get back, because I won't forget. About the mise en scène. When I went to college, right, when I was studying the film theory, do you know what? I had two teachers. I had one teacher that went on film theory. All we seem to remember him now is going blah 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 mise en scène, blah 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 blah, blah mise en scène.
Yeah,
And the other one we had, who was the practical film sides of film studies, so of actually making something, which we had to do each term. All we remember of him is going blah 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 narrative blah blah blah. Blah. So as soon as he said mise en scène, the other teachers
you
just
had the
popped in.
flashback.
Yeah, sorry. So carry on. You were
That's
saying,
okay. No, 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 it's all right. No, it was under my part because it's what I'm saying is I was just confirming what you brought up that you said they're still relevant and you can go look at them and watch them and learn from them is because actually they are in the purest form of using these elements of because filmmaking, as you know it, is a combination of all the other aspect of it. It's a story starting with a good story, and then you get the production design, cinematographer, and everything has to come working in collaboration with each other, and each have a specific language and code of themselves. So cinema, good filmmakers and those silent era art, they used it in the best way to evoke emotion
well, I was
in
going to say it
audience.
was amazing for that because you think about it now. Um, that would be. I mean, there are no short. I mean, no short films. No silent films. But you think actually you don't need sound to evoke emotion from the audience members, do you? I mean, they proved that.
Yeah, not long ago, if you remember that silent black and white movie called the
Oh,
artist,
I
who
never
won
saw
the
that, but I
first.
remember it won the Oscar, didn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and it was silent film. It was made silent and following silent
Yeah, yeah, I
drops.
remember.
Yeah, so yeah,
It just goes to
uh,
show.
yeah, it's understanding that language and try to use it as a tool to tell your story, whatever it is, regardless of genre. Because to me, any good film is a good film. And I watch good films, all different genre, from action to horror to drama, and I don't have that high brow that, because I try to write film or make films and I'm just gonna watch a specific type of film. No, any film is a good film as long as made following those specific, within the good interpretation and use of uh, film language,
Yeah. And also, it leaves a good film as one that basically leaves you with questions that haven't been answered, or like you said, they always kind of leave a memory imprint or a reaction in the audience afterwards, don't they? So that's what a good film should do, I think.
Sure, it can be that, of course. There are films, you don't watch Quentin Tarantino's movie to leaving you with that question. But
No, no,
go
no, no.
watch
I
the
mean, the
first.
mainstream films wouldn't do that as much. They're just pure, like you said, escapism. But then if you went more, sorry, I didn't make myself clear. But then if you went into more of the art house cinema um, movies, then they're basically the ones that are a bit more ambiguous and kind of leave the audience member with a bit of a question mark to figure out themselves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very good old tradition of European art cinema. This is how it got to Hollywood.
Mm.
With open ending. It's referred as open ending.
Okay.
Because you leave it to your story get to a point that the ending, regardless if it's go left or right, okay, it makes no difference because you gave enough information to the audience to leave them with that question. Now go think about it.
Yeah.
Okay? And it's a tradition. It started from Europe,
Okay.
and then it entered with a new wave of Hollywood filmmakers, including Martin Scorsese, Brian De Palma, Francis Ford Coppola, etc. They adopted that approach of filmmaking of Europe and brought it and what was called the new wave of Hollywood filmmakers.
Okay.
They rebelled against the studio way of approaching films, and open ending is something, as I believe, as what you mentioned, as a writer, it's a cinema has with the it's an intelligent cinema, and also give value to the audience intelligence. You give them something from point of view of writing or directing, and leave them with the information that you want them to know.
Yeah.
You don't spoon fed them, and then at the end leave them with that open ending with a question mark that now you go think about it.
Yeah, but you know what? I know there are some people that get very frustrated with that also, don't they? They're like, that was such a waste of a film. Why did I go watch that? But you don't realise you're meant to do the work yourself sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right, but sometimes it's a very fine line. Sometimes being too much ambiguous from the writer director actually confuses. Yeah, it's a right balance.
Yeah.
There are that leave you with a open ending, and you think, okay. But there are sometimes which make you more ambiguous. It's so ambiguous and gives you not enough information, or at least some kind of a direction for the audience to go think about. And then at the end, leave it open, and you just make them think, oh, what happened?
Yeah.
So for me, finding that right balance, that you don't take them as people who don't understand. They have intelligence, but also don't try to be too much high, intellectual and highbrow that make it so confusing that it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Did you ever see those? Because we were talking about the silent era earlier, and I just thought of a couple. Did you ever see that film? Because we studied it in college, Un Chien Dalou or Un Perro Dalou, and it was.
Yeah, the short film.
Yeah, yeah,
Dali
yeah, Dali and is it Brunei? That's such a strange film, but it's really. I mean, that's another one that came out in the 20s, and it was really shocking to the audience, didn't it? They banned it, I think, for a very long time.
Lots of places, yeah, and I also remember coming. This is interesting because I watched that as part of the approach into experimental film.
Yeah, we did too.
And remember, there was Dali, the whole movement of surrealism.
Yeah.
And then Disney, the collaboration. But also the funny thing, it was how, when you approach, that's my understanding of how I go to about the experimental cinema, is about the making, almost visual poetry and connecting it to visual metaphors to evoke a
reaction. Yeah. Well, it's juxtaposition, wasn't it? This is how we learnt about so exactly. You put one image. Yeah, you put one image with another image, which is basically what the film is. It's a load of images, and it leaves react. But I just remember the most disturbing one, which was, I think, the bit where this was the bit that upset. Yes. So they cut to a razor going across the eye. You don't see anything because it didn't flash. It then goes to the next image of, is it a cloud or something
It's the
past?
cloud going through the full moon. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically, it's very clever because it's basically leaving up to the audience member to put the images and think, oh, that's the razor cutting through her eye, basically. But yeah, that's so. Yeah, you're exactly right. That's why it works so well.
Yeah. And a couple of things on that point you just made about leaving it to uh, audience's imagination is a couple of things I'm gonna mention quickly and then get back to you. Go
Okay.
back to your next topic. Is that Alfred Hitchcock is the master of suspense. We all know that,
Yeah,
and also that he's a pure formalist, what is being referred to.
yeah. We studied
Means
him too. I remember.
and no, in a sense that studying it one thing and then watching it and observe it and understand it is the formalist is in a way that he only made a specific one genre, but he used all the element of filmmaking to accentuate that suspense.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the things he always talk about is just he leaves that use the participation of audience's imagination. Okay, and that's what you said. It's true that you just direct them. It's not about showing them the monster or a boogeyman, but it's about kind of directing the imagination to go fill that gap. Because, you can show that okay, open up the eyes or jump on it, but just show them enough and then let them to imagine it. They imagine it the worst scenario
Yeah.
you can ever try to put it on the screen. So, and it's something that Quentin Tarantino used in
Reservoir
Reservoir
Dogs.
Dogs,
Yeah.
when he's trying to torture that poor police officer.
Well, you don't
And
see
he's
that.
gonna,
That's another example, isn't it? Like you actually
yeah,
don't see
yeah,
it because the camera pans
exactly.
away.
There you go.
But it's the fact
Exactly.
that you can hear the guy screaming and the camera kind of pans away for you because as an audience member, you don't want to see that anyway. But your mind is doing the work as you're hearing the scream in the background.
Exactly.
So that's a very good sort of way of saying how Quentin Tarantino could have maybe referred to something like in Perodalu because or on Shiadaru because they use the same kind of juxtaposition. Well, it's not
Yeah.
juxtaposition, but it's just leaving up to the audience to do the disturbing
Yeah.
work for themselves.
Imagination. Leave it with your. I mean, he's gonna
Yeah,
torture him. He's gonna. But let's watch what's happening. Oh, what's the writing on top of that entrance? By the way, look at there. But your brain is still there because you're
yeah,
hearing the
yeah,
scream.
yeah. And you know,
And
it's
that's
funny because you said that, and I just thought of another good example of that of when you don't need to actually physically see something to make it to make the audience feel uncomfortable. And I just thought of that scene, the very famous shower scene in Psycho, because
okay. Yeah.
that's another good example, isn't it? Because you don't actually see the knife penetrating her. You just see a close up of the knife, a close up of her body, a close up of the knife, a close up of the body, and then you just see the blood, which is in black and white going. So, but it's the music and it's the way they've edited it that makes you think,
Yeah.
oh, actually, I have seen that, but you haven't. Do you know what I mean?
How exactly is editing is the camera angle and camera movement and the music is the mastery of using all elements of filmmaking to because editing there are certain things you don't get it in any other art form. Okay, and editing is one of them.
Yeah.
The music is one of them. You use all these different layers. So as you mentioned, exactly, you don't see the actual knife, but you see the close up of this. She's screaming close up, and then you get that string music.
Hang on, I'm going to find it. Hang on, let me quickly find it on Spotify.
Sure.
Hang on, what is it?
And,
I'm going to quickly put it in Spotify so everyone can hear it. Just in
yeah,
case.
exactly.
Because
And then
it's so well known. Shower
yeah,
scene.
and on that note, I would refer to Steven Spielberg, which followed the footsteps of Alfred Hitchcock for his first film, Dwell, and then he completed that kind of following up in his footsteps in Jaws. Same scenario. You
Yes.
don't get to the white great white shark for half an
Dude,
hour to finish
it's
the
that.
film. But from the beginning, when you get
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know something's happened. You know it's
Yeah,
gonna
no,
get.
yeah, no, that's a really good example. I can't remember who the name of that composer was of Psycho. Was it Bernard? It was Bern.
Uh, I, I don't want to guess it, but yeah, the best thing you can Google, I can Google it for you. But yeah,
Yeah.
he worked a lot with Alfred Hitchcock. Another example you get in the Star Wars when Darth Vader comes.
Dun, 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 dun.
You know, it's the whole mentality that you associate one specific melody with a specific character, and then subconsciously the audience knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the best example from Italian cinema is Once Upon a Time in West.
Ah.